Hey YouTube, welcome back to another History Teacher Acts video with Mr. Terry as I continue to search for historical knowledge here on the internet. Alright, today's video comes from our awesome Patreon members. And they voted on this video this week in the weekly poll. And that is The Holy Roman Empire Explained by WonderWhy. So, I'm looking forward to this because the Holy Roman Empire is an interesting thing from the fact that a lot of people say it's not what it says it is. The famous Voltaire quote said, "The Holy Roman Empire is not holy, not Roman, not an empire." And it's very much a lot of what it says it is, but in name only, right? But it's also one of the older and longer lasting institutions that we've had in history, as it exists for about 1,000 years in lots of different ways, shapes, and forms. So I'm interested to learn more, definitely, and hopefully you guys are too. And excited to check this out with you, and let's see what we can get from this, and I'll see what I can add, if anything, of what I know, or any context or anything like that. But you know what I'm doing here is trying to learn more, share what I can, and kind of go through this together, grow our community and our interest in history over here. All right, with that, before we get going, if you would like to vote in future polls, you can join our Patreon too. It starts at just $1 a month. If you would like to have access to our weekly polls and more influence on the channel, you can go down below and do that. If you like this original video, I always put a link down below so you can head over there and give them a like and subscribe, and at the very least a view. That's really important to me that you do that. And if you haven't subbed to my channel, I'd love to have you do that, and thanks for liking the video. And let's go ahead and get started, though. So, the Holy Roman Empire Explained. All right, learn us.
The Holy Roman Empire was a large collection of thousands of political entities made up of different ethnicities that existed for more than 1,000 years at the heart of Europe, stretching from modern-day Italy to Denmark, from France to Poland. The Holy Roman Empire was an important part of European history, with several countries that exist today having emerged from the empire. Keeping in line with the empire's complex nature, there isn't even a universally agreed upon date as to when the empire actually started.
Now, I'm sure they'll talk about the impression that I was under was that it starts with Charlemagne. I mean, kind of more or less officially, when the Pope crowns him emperor. But I mean, with what authority does the Pope have to crown a political leader necessarily? But nevertheless, it kind of being the starting point of it, with Charlemagne from the Franks, who were a Christian group that had converted to Christianity about a century or so before, and had been kind of defenders historically of Christianity and spreading Christianity. And then when the Pope needed help, there was rebellion, I believe, back in Rome. Charlemagne helped and helped kind of squash this rebellion, thus kind of making the Pope eternally grateful there, and maybe sealing the fact that the Franks are a true defender of the Christian faith, and then crowning him emperor. And then from what I have just known of what I'm going off right now, is that although it changes shape a lot and function over that millennium, you saw the dates over there, that it was officially abolished with Napoleon Bonaparte, okay, in the early 1800s. That was the impression I'm under, but I'm already interested to see if they're saying that it could be more complicated than that. So let's see what they got. Let me go back 5 seconds.
But there isn't even a universally agreed upon date as to when the empire actually started. The two dates cited are 800 and 962 AD. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century, the Roman Empire was reduced to its eastern half. Of course, their capital city was no longer Rome. It was the ethnically Greek city of Constantinople. Now, while the inhabitants of this empire continue to see themselves as, well, the Roman Empire,
Sure,
modern historians tend to refer to them as the Byzantine Empire, based on the
debate for another time, but yes. We've had this debate in my community for a long time. Are the Byzantines actually Romans, right?
old name for the capital city, Byzantium. Anyway, 3 centuries later, the Frankish king Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Romans.
Now, one thing we can say, though, all right, is as the headquarters of the church kind of moves to the east, that in a way created more of a power vacuum that the church, who still remains out west, okay, is going to be able to fill a little bit the political power vacuum that's going to be there. The church becomes more politically influential Starting with, the movement of the capital to the east of Constantinople. And then especially, of course, when the western half of Rome falls, the church became more politically influential then as well.
As the Pope transferred the imperial title from east back to west. At the time, the title was considered vacant because it was held by a woman known simply as Irene, who killed her own son to take power from him. The Frankish kingdoms were split and reunited several times, with three kingdoms emerging that would make up the core of the Holy Roman Empire.
And this is why it's always been confusing too, is it's always breaking up. Like you had it at its height, I think, with Charlemagne there early on. And that pretty much breaks apart. And I guess that's why they're saying also that they don't consider it the start of, maybe not the start of the Holy Roman Empire, because it kind of was getting going with Charlemagne, and then it breaks apart when he dies because there are power struggles and stuff like that. And it does become unified with, was Otto or whatever, a later Holy Roman Emperor. So you get that going on, but it was at its height, pretty much at its beginning there, when it actually had France, right? And you can see here, I know, you don't have, you can see my mouse just on Western France, you don't have that. So that kind of came and went pretty quick as far as its size goes. But from my understanding too, the most consistent part of the Holy Roman Empire has basically been Germany.
German kingdom, the Italian kingdom, and the Burgundian kingdom. There was also the kingdom of Bohemia, but that didn't become a kingdom until 1198. In 961, Otto I, King of Germany, came to the assistance of Pope John XII as the Papal States were invaded by Berenger II of Italy. Otto conquered northern Italy and deposed of Berenger as his own troops abandoned him.
Seems to be a recurring theme now of the empire, as the empire becomes more official, right, when they go and save the butts of the church there. Then it's like really just officially observed. Like, thanks. Let's make sure everyone knows your good deeds by giving you a title or emphasizing your title.
The Pope crowned Otto emperor in 962, the first German to become emperor. Almost all successors would be German for the rest of the empire's existence. The early years of the empire's history are dominated by its strained relations with the papacy. A seemingly never-ending power struggle between various emperors and popes over the course of several centuries.
Because a major thing that's been happening is you'll get like maybe someone like Otto or someone like Charlemagne who gets crowned sort of by a pope. Naturally, they have a good relationship, but what the Holy Roman Empire, the large struggle, in a way, for Europe, has often been when the Holy Roman Emperor and then the Pope, right? So you get the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope may not get along. A lot of it from the perspective that they may be trying to step on their toes a little bit, where it's like the Pope might be telling the Emperor, hey, stay out of the theological and religious issues. But then the Holy Roman Emperor might say, okay, well, stay out of political issues, right? Let us run the political stuff. Or maybe think that they should have more influence in the church about, I know there's some later on controversies later and things about what role should like the Holy Roman Empire have in getting like bishops appointed or something like that, because those church officials often have a lot of political power as well, but I feel like they should have influence over that. So it's always been a history of who is more of an authority, and without them really, it seems like making it very clear that there's these different jobs, right? Religious leader and then political leader, when they often are trying to step over each other that way.
They could never agree who was superior, Pope or Emperor. In the mid-13th century, the empire had an interregnum in which no king was crowned emperor for 67 years. This would actually be the first of 3 interregnums, as another 2 times in the next century and a half would see long stretches of time without a crowned emperor. During the rule of Charles IV,
no wonder it's
the Golden
confusing.
Bull of 1356 saw major changes to the empire. 7 fixed electors were chosen who would decide the King of Germany, which had become a symbolic title of the elected but not yet coronated emperor.
So this is where you're getting an issue, right? Ecclesiastical or church leaders or secular, more government leaders, and how they're going to feel justified. Who has the authority here of things like electing of people? Because they all want a piece of the ability to influence this, right?
In 1440, with the election of Frederick III as emperor, this began 3 straight centuries of emperors from the same royal family, the House of Habsburg from Austria, During the rule of
Little
Maximilian I,
Habsburgs.
the Habsburgs greatly expanded their influence through political marriages, acquiring Spain, Burgundy, Bohemia, and Hungary.
This is when Europe, for me, as somebody who's always trying to study history and then also needing to teach it, it starts to become so chaotic to me. When you start to see these, like the Habsburgs, who are like these leaders of something that's like supposed to be unified, but it's also not, but they're scattered all over. They're like be in the Netherlands, and then they're over here in Eastern Europe, and then parts of Italy. I'll be honest, just as someone, he's in history as a profession pretty much. It complicates things for me. It makes things confusing for me, and I have to keep studying this. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people that know this more than me that I'm trying to learn from. I'm trying to make sense of all this. Is there continuity here? Because it seems so different than the rulership we see traditionally in history of kingdoms and stuff. It seems just way more complicated. And where do you draw lines on things? I don't know. Let me know if you're as confused as I am on a lot of this stuff, especially this era of European history.
War broke out on the Italian peninsula, primarily between the Habsburgs and France, over various territories and their respective inheritance, most notably Milan, Naples, and Sicily. The war would continue on and off for more than 60 years and effectively ended imperial rule in Italy. In 1517, Martin Luther from Saxony published his 95 Theses, criticising the Roman Catholic Church and many of its practices in what became known as the Protestant Reformation.
This is where I know that the Holy Roman Empire is really going to get rocked by this, as it is going to really break apart a lot of their authority when people start rejecting the authority of the Church, which is something the Holy Roman Empire has, often had as a source of its authority is the Church, because the Church has basically a monopoly on religion and the lives of people. And that's where you start seeing, Luther has to go and answer to the Holy Roman Empire, and that's going to be problematic because people are going to support him and then reject that, which is going to bring a whole religious question in the Holy Roman Empire of potential freedom of religion and stuff like that, which doesn't fully happen, but does start to break that apart. And maybe this is the beginning of the end, kind of, for the Holy Roman Empire with the Reformation.
Profoundly changing the course of European history. The Holy Roman Empire became divided as many of the emperor's subjects adopted Lutheranism, creating religious tensions that would last for more than a century, and to an extent, even to this day. It was around this difficult time that probably the most well-known Holy Roman Emperor began his rule, Charles V.
The feature, right, for all the Habsburgs, the chin. I know one of the things that they talk about a lot, or they talk about with the Habsburgs, is like they were really inbred. They were all marrying within their family, and they all had that like big old chin sticks out there.
Charles was already king of Spain.
This is the guy, by the way, that gets to answer for the Reformation. It's pretty hard. It's under his watch that the Reformation is going to happen, which I know undermines his authority, as they're going to lose a lot of their support as a result of this.
And so Habsburg power reached its peak with a vast array of territories both in and out of the empire.
So someone help me with this a little bit. This is where, again, when the Habsburg thing confuses me. Look at the territory here. Now, are we saying this is more of a unified entity? Spain, Netherlands, are they totally separate? Is it more just alliances through family members? This is where I need to learn more, too, about how connected are these political institutions. Because it's the Holy Roman Empire, but there's stuff out of the Holy Roman Empire. So does the Holy Roman Empire technically include Spain at this time? You know what I mean? It is honestly one of my weaker areas.
Empire. His rule was dominated by religious conflict, first starting with a war against various Lutheran princely estates known as the Schmalkaldic League, who were defeated by Charles and several Catholic princes.
Great name. Dude, look at that guy. Look at this guy. John Frederick of Saxony. Dude, I like this guy.
Schmalkaldic League, who were defeated by Charles and several Catholic princes. The Peace of Augsburg in 1555 gave rulers the right to choose the religion of their estate, Catholicism or Lutheranism, based on the principle of cuius regio eius religio. Shortly afterwards,
okay, maybe they'll get to it. I want to make sure it's clear, though, what happens at the Peace of Augsburg, which the violence that is going to happen here is crazy between Christians, the Christians, amongst Lutherans and Catholics alike. And what ends up happening to the Peace of Augsburg is not full religious freedom. It's a compromise. What it basically says is whoever's the king of that sort of province, they will be deciding the official religion of their kingdom. But you still only have two options, which works because most people at this time now, with the Reformation, especially in Germany, are going to be Lutheran or Catholic. So this was, I think, what I understand is one of the early big blows to them is giving a little bit of that autonomy to these princes, because I already know too that especially in Germany there was already long-standing problems with these German princes and the Holy Roman Emperor, for the same reason, where they wanted more authority over their smaller little states within the Holy Roman Empire. Because Holy Roman Empire, I know, is very diverse, and it's more a bunch of kingdoms together, and like smaller states that are semi-autonomous but still are under this umbrella of authority of the Holy Roman Empire. But it's long been problematic. Also, just adding to the Reformation, which is one of my favorite things to study, though, was the fact that the support that some princes had with Martin Luther. I forget the prince's name that helped him out. Luther out, basically helped him be in hiding and protected from authorities, and which showed though that they it exposed the problems they already had with some of these local leaders with the larger empire at large, and kind of used Luther as a I don't know, reason to kind of push back a little bit.
Charles V abdicated, splitting his inheritance between Spain and Austria. His son Philip II succeeded him in Spain, while his younger brother Ferdinand took over as Emperor and Archduke of Austria, starting the cadet branch of the House of Habsburg. Religious tensions continued as a rebellion started in the Spanish Netherlands, eventually leading to the establishment of the Dutch Republic, with 7 of the 17 provinces seceding from Spain and the Empire. In 1618, the 30 Years' War started in Bohemia with the defenestration of Prague, which is just a fancy way of saying throwing someone out of a window. This began the Bohemian Revolt, which spiraled into a continent-wide power struggle with all major European powers involved. The war ended with the Peace of Westphalia, a massive turning point in the Empire's history. Many view this as the beginning of the end of the Holy Roman Empire. Dutch independence was finally officially recognised, as well as the independence of Switzerland and the territories in northern Italy. The empire became even more decentralised, and the Habsburgs' power began to decline.
Look how complicated that is. Look at all these states. There's no unity here. I mean, empires by definition are multicultural, anyways. Though, otherwise they're just large kingdoms. But something to think about.
Peace of Westphalia, it becomes less relevant to talk about the history of the Holy Roman Empire as a whole, because what happened in the last 150 years of the empire's existence relates more to the princely estates as individual entities in their own right. There were several very important and impactful wars throughout the late 17th and early 18th century, such as the Franco-Dutch War, the 9 Years' War, and the War of the Spanish Succession. There were always imperial princes on both sides of these conflicts. There was also the Long Turkish War, but this was more related to the Habsburgs and their possessions, given that much of the fighting was over Hungary, which was never part of the empire. The final years of the empire were dominated by the rivalry between Austria and
the
Prussia,
winged hussars
by far
arrived,
the two most dominant German powers. Austria had a succession crisis, and the Habsburgs' 3 centuries of ruling the empire came to a temporary end as Charles VII of Bavaria took over in 1745. The two powers clashed in the global conflict, the 7 Years' War, over Silesia, as France and Austria unsuccessfully tried to curb the rising Prussian power. The Holy Roman Empire came to an end at the hands of Napoleon and revolutionary France. Austria was invaded in 1792, and renewed tensions in 1806 caused the last emperor, Francis II, to officially dissolve the empire, ending just over 1,000 years of existence.
Okay.
Now, making a video about the Holy Roman Empire, I am of course legally obligated to mention the Voltaire quote that it was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. It's important to look at the context though. Voltaire lived throughout the 1700s, where the empire was very much in its decline. He was also French and part of the Enlightenment movement, so he understandably took a somewhat negative view of the empire, viewing it as something of a relic of the past that had no place in modern society. So just how true is his statement? Well, although the term
It's good.
holy
I'm
wasn't
glad
used
he's
until
getting
some
into this because I like
350
to.
years after its creation, the holy element was
I like
absolutely
to. I like.
essential for the empire to function.
I like to share this. Just the Holy Roman Empire. When I talk about the Enlightenment, shared a lot of famous quotes and stuff from him. So I'm glad I can look in a little bit more into the breakdown because I teach about why they say it's not Holy Roman or an empire. But let's validate any of this.
The years after its creation, the holy term
Let's go
holy
back.
society. So just how true is his statement? Well, although the term holy wasn't used until some 350 years after its creation, the holy element was
I didn't know that.
absolutely essential for the empire to function.
Sure.
Its primary purpose was to provide a stable political order for all Christians.
Right.
The emperor was supposed to be the guardian of the pope and defend his subjects against infidels. At the time, the thought of a secular power was inconceivable without any reference to a divine authority.
Right. That's an important thing. The whole divine right rule is why should you be able to rule over me? Now it is a feudal era, and you generally loyalty is based on who can take care of you, but especially here later in the sort of Middle Ages, with the church being again exceedingly more powerful. That divine right is if you can be convinced that the person is sort of ordained of God or supported by spokesmen of God, then that person naturally should have authority, right? And it would be hard to argue that if this is truly God's mouthpiece or God's anointed, God's chosen, then you should listen to them and you should do what they say and be unified under that premise. Makes sense.
In practice, of course, the various emperors and popes throughout the years had somewhat strained relations, and the papacy became less and less involved in the empire's politics as the years went on. The term Holy Empire was first used in 1157 by the ruling Stauffer family, who tried to shift the emphasis from a monarch to a transpersonal Holy Empire that had already sanctified its divine mission, and therefore the empire did not need approval from the Pope. So in effect, the addition of the word holy was actually an attempt to distance the empire from the papacy.
Okay.
Now,
That's problematic.
That's a little bit more tricky.
This is
it
easy,
may seem
right?
obvious to some that it was quite clearly not Roman, it was German. It's pretty clear that it was not a direct continuation of the Roman Empire, and even if it was, it wouldn't have revived the Western Roman Empire that actually had Rome as its capital, but rather it would have inherited its Romanness from the now Greek Eastern Roman Empire when the title of emperor was transferred from Constantinople back to Rome. The divide between the Latin West and the Greek East had been growing stronger over the preceding couple of centuries. Charlemagne was crowned in the year 800 with a somewhat tenuous link to the ancient Roman Empire. The prestige and authority commanded by the title Roman Emperor still held a lot of weight in the West, and Charlemagne was recognized as emperor.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's when I teach it, I often think of what Charlemagne is doing is in a way trying to create Rome 2.0, right out here in the West. Rome kind of 2.0, and they did a lot of things. They revived Latin learning. Even though, again, he's not a Latin per se. And so there's an attempt at that for sure of trying to be like another Rome.
Giving him immense power and status. People at the time really did view the empire as a direct continuation from ancient Rome. Frankish rule over Italy didn't begin until 774, and although the Franks had been Christianized and even somewhat Romanized, they didn't want to completely lose their own identity. As the years went on, of course, it became much less Roman and much more German. After a few centuries, most emperors didn't even travel south of the Alps in their entire reign, except to be crowned by the Pope, and even that was discontinued after Charles V. The word empire doesn't really have a universally agreed upon definition, so it's not really possible to definitively say that it was or wasn't an empire. The idea of an emperor was that he was a monarch above that of a king, a sort of king of kings. Now, according to the divine mandate, the Roman Empire was to be the last and greatest empire.
Okay, I think a more classical definition for empire is going to be it's multi-ethnic. That's a big thing. It usually involved annexing places that are different than you, right? Culturally, racially, if you consider it that way. Sometimes religiously, they're different than you. It is multi-ethnic. Otherwise, you just got a larger kingdom at hand, right? So that's I think the one that's usually classically been talked about is how is it an empire? Okay, diversity of subject peoples. Okay.
And there could only be one. The idea of an empire was singular and universal. This idea of singularity was deeply rooted in Christian thought at the time. Empires could not coexist. This was based on the theory of translatio imperii, the pretext used by the Pope to transfer authority from Constantinople. For most of its history, the Holy Roman Empire was referred to as simply the Empire, without any qualifiers, even in official documents. There were no other empires that were recognised in the West for most of its history. The Holy Roman Empire wasn't just an empire, it was the empire. Whether or not it could be classed as an empire by today's standards is debatable.
An extensive group of states or countries ruled over by a single monarch, an oligarchy, or a sovereign state. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I do still kind of stick, just when you look at those that have been called empires often are, it's again more multi-ethnic, right? The people are different. The different peoples are different. Otherwise, how do you you just say extensive? So the only difference between a kingdom and an empire is just it's larger. That's hard too. I think that's not as useful of a definition.
The empire was quite decentralized, and many of the regional princes commanded more power in their territory than the emperor did. The Holy Roman Empire was quite a unique political entity. There's not really much else that is comparable.
So maybe, I mean, it meets the definition for being like kind of multi-kingdom, multi-ethnic, right? There's different, all kinds of different differences between the people, but you do need for it to be an empire is to have some centralization, right? Otherwise, you're more of a, I don't know, confederation or something like that. There's got to be some centralization, like what the Roman Empire had. Like there was some autonomy in some of the provinces, but you still answered to an emperor, and people understood that, and you could enforce that.
The Holy Roman Empire used a complex system of feudalism to rule over its many territories. Local authority was delegated to vassals, who would normally in turn have their own vassals, creating a hierarchy of lords and vassals who swore allegiance to each other. Lords would protect their vassals, and vassals would help and advise their lords, and often pay them in cash, work, or military assistance.
This is the one you usually hear in school about feudalism, and this is more of the structure than a larger entity. Because it's like this system existed before the Holy Roman Empire. And what the Holy Roman Empire is almost like put itself on top, where you have this lord and a vassal, but then you're going to have a king, and then you're adding one more entity up there, an emperor just above that. So it's kind of the Holy Roman Empire became a blanket over a feudal structure that already dominated European continent.
Now, vassals could either be immediate or mediate vassals. Immediate vassals were those that were immediately subordinate to the emperor, while mediate vassals had at least one overlord between themselves and the emperor. Sure. Immediate vassals of the emperor were referred to as imperial princes, and their territories were imperial estates. Imperial estates could pay a general tax to the empire to take part in the imperial diet, or the Reichstag. Those who did not pay the tax were not involved in decisions and had no vote. After 1489, the imperial estates were divided into three separate chambers or colleges: prince-electors, imperial princes, and imperial cities. There were also the Imperial Knights that were immediate vassals to the emperor but not represented. Counts and other nobles did not have a vote, despite their immediacy status, although they were grouped into benches that had a collective vote. The prince-electors were considered of a higher status than that of the other princes. The prince-electors had the important task of electing the emperor. For most of the empire's history, there were 7 prince-electors, 3 ecclesiastical electors and 4 secular electors. The elective process quickly became corrupt, and the imperial title was pretty much just gained via bribery.
Yeah. It's like when you have the more moving parts you have in a government, the more likely it can be corrupted, right? There's just more opportunities for that.
In the year 1500, the empire was divided into 6 imperial circles. The circles were created to better organise the empire's defensive structures, as well as to facilitate tax collection. In 1512, a further 3 were added, and Saxony was divided into 2. There were also areas that were not part of any imperial circle, most notably Bohemia, plus the Swiss and Italian parts of the empire. Now, unfortunately,
Swiss being independent? What?
Unfortunately, due to its complexity, it's impossible to represent the hierarchy of the Holy Roman Empire with a neat little pyramid with the emperor at the top. There was no single chain of command, and many of the internal hierarchies were interconnected. Imperial princes could have the same political status as each other, but with different prestige based on their noble title, such as king, duke,
and they're going to
king,
hate that.
on. The most powerful
Too many titles. Too competitive. Too much jealousy, right?
imperial estate for centuries, Austria, created their own title, Archduke. Brandenburg Prussia became a kingdom in 1701,
Like
but for
Ferdinand?
the first 71 years, kings were titled King in Prussia as opposed to King of Prussia, because Prussia fell outside of the territory of the empire and therefore did not require imperial authorization.
You all following this?
Prussia was well on its way to becoming a great power in its own right, so
Yeah.
really there was nothing the empire could do to stop them anyway. At the start of the video, I mentioned that the Holy Roman Empire was comprised of 3 core kingdoms: Germany, Italy, and Burgundy. Plus
Not anymore.
Bohemia, but that's a little different. So who was the king of Germany, and how did this title play into the hierarchy of the empire? Well, the king of Germany, Italy, and Burgundy were 3 separate titles, but in practice for most of the empire's history, all 3 titles were held by the same person, who was usually the emperor as well. This wasn't always the case, and in the earlier years it was more complicated, but generally speaking it was one person who held all titles. Bohemia was its own autonomous kingdom, being elevated from a duchy in 1198. The Bohemian crown lands came under Habsburg rule from the 15th century onwards, with some gaps, so many of the Bohemian kings were in fact emperor simultaneously. The Holy Roman Empire lasted for just over 1,000 years and oversaw Central Europe's transformation from a feudal, agrarian and religiously uniform region to an increasingly centralised, urban and religiously divergent
sure.
one. While the Holy Roman Empire was a significant power for a large part of its history, it didn't seem to be able to survive the changes in European society that eventually rendered it obsolete.
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
Holy
Well,
Roman Empire was dissolved
Yeah.
just over 2 centuries ago, but here's an interesting thought. What would the world look like if the empire existed today? What if the Holy Roman Empire was somehow resurrected?
Okay.
Well, looking at that very question in his latest video is my friend Real Life Lore, so I encourage you to go and watch his video right now.
Let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in, especially you Patreon members.
Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Cool.
Dissolved just
All right. So it's still very complicated, it seems like. The question I was going to ask was, at what points in history, throughout this 1,000 years, right, that we got here, I guess, was the Holy Roman Empire necessary as an entity? When did it actually matter that it was an empire? Does that make sense? Because it sounds, again, like its whole history has very much been one of autonomy for a long time, for much of it. So at what parts? Is it more just those first, what they say, coronations, where you get like Charlemagne or Otto, or just as examples there, as an entity there? And is it more of what? Do you think it's more of what Voltaire called it? You know, that it's far more just in name than anything else, than an actual entity. I don't know. What do you guys think? What has your impression of the Holy Roman Empire? What have you been taught about it? And how does that reflect? I mean, how does that reflect, you think, what's being discussed here? Because it is, I think, undoubtedly quite complicated as it changes shape, and there's so much inner workings, and they're saying they're always changing the structure all the time, and no wonder it's hard to keep up. And to be honest, it doesn't get taught as much. I mean, it gets I feel like in generally in education it gets referred to a lot, but like actual its function, and I can see why it's hard to learn about. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, and it's more complicated to me than other people think. But definitely let me know if you find this. This history of the Holy Roman Empire is confusing often as I do. But anyway, It was great. Definitely learned some more things, a little bit more about the intricacies of it. One of the big things that I didn't know is that war wasn't referred to as the Holy Roman Empire. For that term wasn't even used very much, and especially wasn't used till much, much later on. So that was something interesting, again, that I learned. And about kind of the different kingdoms. I mean, I know there's just so many of them, but the larger ones. And maybe that's what's turned off a lot of people, too, is when you look at how many, yeah, the kingdoms you got to understand and how it's different and how it changes so much. But all right. Well, anyway, this video again was chosen by our patrons, so thank you, patrons, for choosing this video. And if you'd like to join, links down below to all kinds of stuff, to the original video. Go there if you liked it. Be sure you go over and go to the original video to give them a like, subscription. Looks like a good channel. I think this is the first time I've looked at this channel, WonderWhy. So it looks like they do some good things, some good research and information there. That's great. So anyways, overall though, what do you guys think of the Holy Roman Empire? What is your impression of it? How do you summarize what the Holy Roman Empire was, and I guess sort of its legacy in a way? You can do that in comments, or better yet, join our Discord community. There's a link down below too. You can get down and start talking about it. I know there's a lot of people that talk about the Holy Roman Empire a lot down there, and you can probably get questions answered, or just simply hang out down there to do that. But thanks again for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll go ahead and call it here, and we'll go ahead and see you guys next time. Bye.